You ever step outside one morning, coffee in hand, and wonder why your front lawn looks like it spent the night in a swamp? Well, that was me about 2.5 weeks ago. The yard was soaked like a busted fire hydrant had gone off, puddles all over the place, and the hose still felt warm, like someone had just finished using it. Thing is, I live alone. No kids, no roommates, and definitely no sneaky gnomes borrowing water for some secret garden party. Just me, my coffee mug, and apparently a lawn that decided to self-irrigate overnight. My first thought? Maybe the sprinkler system was acting up. Then it hit me. I don't even have a sprinkler system. Just one lonely garden hose. That's when the weird stuff started adding up. My water bill? Skyrocketed. Not by a few bucks. I'm talking, are you filling an Olympic pool every night levels? And the only thing back there is a wilting tomato plant and an old grill that hasn't worked since Quinn was president? So where the heck was all that water going? I started poking around, asking a few neighbors. Most were nice, except for Karen. Yep, her real name. She'd only been on the block a couple of months, and somehow managed to crown herself neighborhood royalty. She didn't hold any official title, but with that clipboard she always had in hand, you'd think she was the HOA dictator. She'd nitpick the shade of someone's shutters, bark at folks about their grass length, and even scolded the mailman for aggressive parking. She wasn't just annoying. She was the full package. Entitled, power-hungry, and loud about it. Still, I didn't peg her for a thief. Until a Friday evening proved me wrong. I'd just gotten back from the store and was pulling into my driveway when I spotted her. There she was, wearing a loud floral blouse and a ridiculous sun hat, yanking my hose across my front yard like she owned it. She hooked it up to some portable pressure washer and just started blasting her porch clean, like it was her God-given right to help herself. No knocking, no asking, not even a guilty glance. Just out there like she paid my bills and lived in my shoes. I sat in the car, stunned. She caught my eye, waved like we were old buddies, and yelled, "Hope you don't mind. Just a quick rinse." Before I could even open my mouth, she spun around and kept at it like nothing was wrong. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, debating whether to say something or pretend it didn't happen. I chickened out, went inside, and stared at the kitchen faucet like it had betrayed me. Later that day, I decided to knock on her door. Politely, mind you. I asked if maybe she was having issues with her own water hookup. She laughed. Not a normal laugh. One of those smug, dismissive chuckles. Then she said, "Oh no, I just like your hose better. Great pressure. And hey, it's all community property, right?" Community property. I almost spit out my own teeth. Last I checked, this wasn't a hippie commune, and rainwater wasn't being divvied up by the gods. That water was running off my meter, so I told her, as calmly as I could, that I wasn't okay with her using my stuff without permission. She cocked her head, gave me a sweet but condescending smile, and said, "Well, I'm sure the HOA won't mind. Sharing is caring, right?" Then, slam, door closed. No apology, no discussion, just that smug little grin. Now look, I'm not the type to start drama. I don't yell. I don't escalate. I handle things like an adult. So I went the proper route. Snapped a few photos, attached them to an email, and sent it to the HOA. Included a copy of my water bill too, just for good measure. I asked if there was any clause about neighbors treating each other's property like a public park. A few days later, I got a reply. "Thank you for your concern. At this time, we encourage all neighbors to resolve minor disputes amicably without HOA intervention." Translation? You're on your own, buddy. Fine, I thought. I'll handle it myself. So I bought a hose lock. Simple solution. If she couldn't get to it, she couldn't use it. Problem solved, right? Not even close. The next morning, I walked outside and found the lock lying on the ground, sliced clean through. Not picked, not forced, cut, like someone took bolt cutters to it and walked off whistling. I stood there looking as if I'd just seen a UFO. Part of me actually scanned the scene for fingerprints. Not that I'd know what to do with them, but deep down, I already knew who did it. And sure enough, across the street, there she was, Karen, blasting her shiny SUV with my hose, like she was shooting a commercial for luxury water. Just water flying everywhere, soap suds glistening, all while she wore that same smug, you can't touch me smile. I marched over, not angry yet, just fed up. Asked her point blank about the lock. She shrugged. Oh, it was a tripping hazard. I removed it. Safety first. Then she giggled, flipped her over-dyed hair, and went right back to scrubbing her rims. I couldn't believe it. Walked back inside, shut the door, and just stared at the wall like my brain had been unplugged. The HOA wouldn't lift a finger. Karen was untouchable, and I was now her unpaid utility sponsor. That's when I got the idea. If I couldn't stop her, maybe I could catch her. I bought one of those tiny motion-activated cameras and tucked it under the gutter, right near the spigot. Didn't need anything flashy, just something to catch her in the act. If I had proof, maybe the HOA would finally get off their hands. Or maybe, just maybe, the internet would do what they wouldn't. Because if there's one thing the internet loves, it's watching an entitled thief get roasted in 4K. 2 days later, I had her, clear as day, creeping into my yard like she was planning a heist, dragging my hose across the lawn with that same I do what I want attitude. She watered her flowers, filled a kiddie pool, and even gave her muddy dog a bath, all before I'd even gotten out of bed. It was like a full Karen-themed variety show, and I had the whole performance on camera. So I posted a clip to our neighborhood forum with the title, "Neighbor Steals My Water Every Morning." That thing blew up fast. People were outraged. Some laughed. Some offered legal tips. One guy even sent me a link to a sprinkler that automatically blasts intruders. But the best part? Karen saw it. I knew because the next morning, she knocked on my door. No hat, no smile, just rage in a tank top. She accused me of violating her privacy, damaging her image, and fostering a hostile environment. I shot right back, told her she was stealing from me, violating my rights, and turning my utility bill into a second mortgage. She crossed her arms and growled the dumbest line I've ever heard. Do something about it. I dare you. And that was the spark. That challenge lit something inside me I didn't even know was there. Because, I was going to do something about it. Something she'd never see coming. Something she'd never be able to forget. If Karen wanted water, I was going to make sure she got plenty. Just not the kind she was expecting. That next morning, I didn't wake up as the friendly neighbor anymore. No more let's be civil. No more begging the HOA to do their job. No more locks for her to cut like she owned the place. She threw down a challenge, and I was going to answer it. Not with shouting or drama. No. I was planning a lesson she'd remember every time she so much as touched a faucet. But revenge takes planning, and I wasn't about to wing it. First, I needed to know just how far she'd go. Was she only sneaking water when I wasn't home? Or was she arrogant enough to steal it in plain sight? No matter what. So I took a day off work and turned my house into a stakeout. Blinds closed, coffee in hand, eyes on the front yard like a hawk. Sure enough, at exactly 9:45 a.m., I heard that familiar hiss from the spigot, the rustle of the hose dragging through the grass like it belonged to her. I peeked through the blinds, and there she was again. Karen, dressed like she was heading to a fake yoga class, casually spraying down her driveway, acting like she ran the neighborhood. This time, I walked out with my phone in hand, pretending to scroll. She spotted me, paused for half a second, then carried on like I didn't exist, didn't flinch, didn't care. It was like she was saying, "Go ahead, try and stop me." I didn't say a word, just recorded. She finished her rinse and had the nerve to wave the hose at me. "See," she said, "works great. You should thank me for keeping it in shape." I faked a smile and went back inside, fists clenched. Watched the footage again. Crystal clear, no zoom needed, just raw. Entitled theft, caught in perfect detail. But I already knew what would happen if I sent it to the HOA. Nothing. They pat me on the head and tell me to play nice. That bridge had already burned. It was time for a different kind of justice. That afternoon, I uploaded the new clip to the neighborhood Facebook group. Gave it a catchy headline: Local resident Karen uses a neighbor's hose for her spa treatments. Within hours, the comments exploded. Apparently, everyone had a Karen story, but mine hit a nerve. People laughed. Some were furious. Others offered hilarious solutions, like chaining her to the spigot. A few even dropped legal advice. And the best part? It didn't stay local. The post started spreading. It made it to Reddit. It got re-uploaded on YouTube. Folks from other states were tagging their friends. Karen had become viral, and not in the good way. Oh, and she noticed. Next morning, I saw her standing in her yard, this time with 2 HOA board members. She was pointing toward my house, all dramatic, flailing her arms like she was doing Shakespeare in the park. Even wiped away a fake tear. I just stood at the window, sipping my coffee, watching her put on a performance. A few hours later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. Official HOA stationery. Inside, a formal warning for unauthorized surveillance and creating a hostile environment. I almost choked on my toast. Hostile environment? I hadn't even spoken to her in that video. They were more offended by me recording a thief than by the theft itself. That was it. I was officially done playing by their rules. If the system was broken, I'd build my own. I started brainstorming. Security alarms? Too loud. Fake signs? Too weak. Some clever prank? Not enough. I didn't want a mess. I wanted a message. Something poetic. Something she'd feel in her bones. And like divine timing, I drove past a construction site near the edge of the neighborhood. Big crew, heavy machinery, and smack in the middle of it all, a massive temporary sewage tank. Not your standard porta potty. I'm talking industrial grade, built to hold gallons of pure, concentrated nastiness. And that's when the idea hit me. A plan so awful and perfect, it made me grin like a maniac. I pulled over, wandered up to one of the workers, and made some small talk. Told him I was a homeowner with drainage issues and might need a tank for some backyard irrigation testing. He laughed, but he didn't care. We chatted a bit, and with a little cash slipped his way, he agreed to let me hook into it for just one evening. Strictly testing. Of course, as long as I didn't touch the pump, he said, it was all mine. That was all I needed to hear. Back at home, I got to work, dug out my tools, built a small adapter that ran from my spigot to a secondary hose. That second hose, I buried it behind some bushes and ran it straight into the sewage tank. From the outside, it all looked normal. But once someone turned that nozzle, let's just say it wasn't going to be Evian coming out, I gave it a test run first, using a sealed bucket and some gloves. The results were glorious. The smell alone could have taken out a grown bull. Mission accomplished. That night, under cover of darkness, I set everything up. Made sure the camera was rolling. Left the hose right where Karen always found it, coiled neatly by the spigot. The trap was set. The bait was perfect. And like clockwork, at 10:30 sharp the next morning, I heard it. That familiar hiss. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the live feed. There she was, smug as ever, dragging the hose across my lawn like she was stealing candy from a baby. No hesitation, no guilt. She didn't even check if I was home. She hooked up the hose to some fancy new rotating sprinkler, placed it right in the middle of her pristine lawn, and cranked the spigot. At first, just a weird gurgle, then a sputter. She tilted her head, confused, and then it happened. A high-pressure blast of thick, brown sewage shot into the air like a geyser of justice. It hit the lawn, the porch. I could hear it through the walls. She ran to shut it off, slipping and sliding in her own self-made cesspool. Neighbors started poking their heads out. One guy dropped his coffee. Another started recording. Karen was slipping, gagging, flailing like the hose was trying to strangle her. She finally yanked it loose, but not before another blast of raw sewage soaked her from the knees down. Her sandals were destroyed. Her driveway was a war zone, and she was a walking, screaming, sewage-covered mess. And best of all, everyone saw it. Dozens of witnesses, real people, real phones, real karma. I sat on the couch, watching it unfold like a front row seat at the opera. This wasn't just payback. This was performance art. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside, whistling, pretending to check the mail. Karen saw me and lost it. She stormed across the street like a banshee, covered in filth, ranting about lawsuits and health hazards and God knows what else. And I didn't say a single word. I just gave her a smile and said, "You told me to do something about it, so I did." Her face cycled through colors like a traffic light. Red, then pale, then back to furious red. She spun around and stormed off, screaming something about calling the HOA. As she stomped across the street, I waved and added, "Make sure you let them know the water wasn't stolen this time." That night, I uploaded the footage. And man, the internet did not disappoint. Karen was now officially famous, in the worst way imaginable. By the next morning, everything on our street felt different. People weren't whispering anymore. They were laughing, loudly, openly, in groups. From the moment Karen's sewage sprinkler surprise went live, her reputation didn't just fall. It nosedived so hard it practically broke the sidewalk. The clip spread like wildfire, especially after someone added dramatic violin music and slow-motion replays of her reaction. Here's the wild part. I wasn't the one who posted it this time. Some genius neighbor beat me to it. Judging by the angle, it came from the second-story balcony across the street. Within 12 hours, the footage had made its way to Reddit, TikTok, and even some Facebook mom group pages titled things like "When Karens Finally Get Served" and "Neighborhood Justice Hose Edition." But as much fun as that moment was, I wasn't done. See, the sewage stunt, that was just phase one, a great opener. But I knew Karen. She wasn't the kind of person who reflects and grows. If anything, the backlash would just feed her need for control. I knew she'd strike back. And sure enough, she did. That afternoon, an official-looking envelope showed up at my door. Inside, a letter written in all caps like she'd smashed the keyboard with rage. Filled with legal jargon, fake lawyer speak, and some of the most dramatic claims I've ever read. She accused me of biological terrorism, said I'd endangered her health, and that her poor dog had suffered emotional trauma. Except the footage clearly showed the dog was never even near the blast zone. Honestly, I almost felt bad for whatever lawyer she roped into drafting that nonsense, assuming she found one that didn't laugh her out of the office. But still, I took the letter as confirmation. Karen wasn't backing down, so neither was I. Phase 2 was already underway. First, I reinforced my camera setup, added 2 more motion detectors on the side of the house, and one hidden right above the hose, tucked inside a fake birdhouse. I wasn't just protecting the yard anymore. I wanted full surveillance, wall-to-wall coverage. If she so much as breathed near my spigot again, I'd know. Then I made another visit to the construction site, just to drop off some pizzas and a big thank you to the crew. They still thought I was testing some quirky fertilizer flow. I didn't bother correcting them. Back home, I upgraded the whole hose rig. The first version had been a hands-on job with careful timing. Now I installed a remote-controlled valve splitter in my garage. At the flip of a switch, I could route water from the regular line or the sewage tank. The setup was hidden underground, covered with fresh turf, totally in. It was ridiculous. It was over-engineered, and it was perfect. If Karen ever dared to use that hose again, she'd be playing the nastiest game of Russian roulette in suburban history. But then something strange happened. Karen disappeared. Not like moved away vanished, more like hid. For 2 days straight, her curtains stayed drawn. No car movement, no patrols, no clipboard crusades, nothing. It was quiet, too quiet. And sure enough, on the 3rd day, the storm rolled in. A new letter from the HOA showed up in my mailbox. Only this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a fine. A real one. $600 slapped on me for creating a hazardous environment and violating neighborhood health protocols. I stood on my porch blinking at the paper like it had personally insulted my intelligence. I called the HOA office immediately, demanded answers, and got passed around like a hot potato. Eventually, someone admitted that Karen had filed a formal complaint, complete with doctored photos and 3 witnesses who claimed I threatened her with a chemical attack. Chemical attack. I couldn't even muster a laugh. It was so outrageous it circled back to being impressive. I offered them everything: full video logs, timestamps, construction documents showing the setup was 100% on my property. Their response? We'll review it at the next board meeting, which of course was a month away. That's when it hit me. Karen knew the system inside out. Slow, clunky, easily manipulated. She was using HOA bureaucracy like armor, hiding behind paperwork and pretending to be the victim. But she made one fatal error. She assumed I'd let it go, that I'd pay the fine and sulk. What she didn't know was I'd already started digging. Over the next few days, I became a man on a mission. I scoured public records, pored over the HOA bylaws like they were the Dead Sea Scrolls, even took a trip to the county clerk's office. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about precision. And then I found it, buried in the bylaws, section 3.9a, clear as day. Any resident found trespassing on another property without permission, particularly to use utilities, is subject to investigation, fines, and potential loss of HOA privileges. That was it, my golden ticket. Karen had strutted onto my property dozens of times, and I had footage, time-stamped, multiple angles, real witnesses, not the imaginary kind she used. So I printed it all, stapled together a thick packet like I was preparing for court, mailed copies to the HOA, and for good measure, I dropped off a few to the neighbors Karen had terrorized over the months. I didn't start a fight. I sparked a rebellion. 2 days later, Walter, the quiet guy from 2 houses down, knocked on my door. He said Karen once reported him for owning a visually disruptive hammock. He shook my hand and said, "Thank you." Then came another neighbor, and another. Karen had made enemies on every block. All I did was light the match. Soon, the neighborhood was buzzing. People were comparing notes, swapping stories, and trading clips like collectibles. The footage had become legend. And Karen, well, her empire was collapsing. The final nail? A leaked audio recording from a private HOA meeting. Someone had captured Karen trying to manipulate the board, whining, threatening, even offering favors if they'd push her agenda. Once that went public, even the HOA couldn't defend her. So yeah, she wanted a war, but what she got was a neighborhood uprising. And me? I just wanted my hose back. Her voice was unmistakable, that sharp, entitled pitch like she was used to winning every argument before it started. And of course, she wrapped it up by screaming about how she was being targeted by jealous neighbors who couldn't handle a strong woman. That clip, paired with the viral sewage sprinkler fiasco, created a social media storm so perfect it could have made headlines. 2 days later, Karen finally showed her face. No clipboard, no smug grin, just big sunglasses, no makeup, and the defeated posture of someone who'd been publicly dethroned. She didn't scream, she didn't touch my hose. She quietly got in her car, avoided eye contact with everyone on the street, and drove off. For the first time in what felt like forever, the neighborhood was quiet. Peaceful, the way it used to be, before Queen Karen moved in. But I wasn't stupid enough to think it was over. People like her don't just vanish. They regroup, they plot, they look for a way to crawl back into power. That's why I kept the remote valve hooked up. That's why the cameras stayed rolling, 24/7. Because this wasn't about water anymore, it was about boundaries. And Karen had finally learned mine came with consequences. 3 days passed in eerie silence. Her house looked like it had been placed under lockdown. No activity, no car, no patio music, not a single stolen drop from my hose. It was so still, it felt like a setup. And I knew Karen well enough by now to recognize. She wasn't retreating. She was scheming. The woman didn't know how to let go. Not because she was courageous, but because she hated losing control. And after the sewage incident, she'd lost everything. Her patio, her pride, and her fake little title as queen of the cul-de-sac. So when a knock landed on my door just past noon, I already knew who it was. What I didn't expect? She brought backup. Right there on my porch stood Karen, arms crossed, mouth tight, flanked by two HOA board members. One held a clipboard, the other clutched a fat folder. Karen was dressed like she was headed to a courtroom, stiff, smug, and clearly rehearsing a monologue in her head. Clipboard guy cleared his throat and said they were there to address a property dispute and possible biohazard incident. I asked if they wanted to come in. Karen immediately snapped, "I don't feel safe entering his home." I didn't laugh out loud, but inside I was wheezing. This wasn't about danger. It was her last attempt to spin the narrative, to play the victim card. They handed me a formal complaint. 4 pages of drama, exaggeration, and nonsense. Karen accused me of weaponizing sewage, said I had created an environmental crisis, claimed emotional trauma and public humiliation. She even said the smell had seeped into her home's foundation, which told me she had absolutely no clue how plumbing works. I let them talk, nodded a few times, waited for the part I knew was coming. Karen eventually demanded that I pay for cleaning her yard and patio. She wanted a formal apology. And get this, she insisted I attend an HOA conflict resolution seminar. I held up a finger. "Give me a second," I said. I stepped inside, grabbed a folder I'd prepared for this exact moment, and came back out. In it was everything. Time-stamped footage of Karen entering my yard, stealing my water, over and over again. Screenshots of the neighborhood forum, water bills, and a signed list of other neighbors who'd complained about her antics. On top, a highlighted copy of the HOA bylaw she broke, the one about trespassing and using another resident's utilities without permission. Clipboard guy took his time, flipped through each page like he was flipping her crown off her head. Karen went pale. The other board member leaned in and whispered something. Suddenly, the whole energy shifted. Karen jumped in, trying to talk over them. She claimed the videos were fake, said I was stalking her, said I'd created a toxic environment. But this time, no one was buying it. The board members said they'd need time to review the evidence and would call a special meeting within the week. Karen pushed back, demanding immediate action. They ignored her. As they walked away, Karen turned to me, her voice low and shaky. "I'll make sure everyone sees what kind of person you really are," she hissed. I didn't miss a beat. They already do. She stomped away, mumbling something I didn't bother decoding. That night, I posted a calm, no-frills summary in the same neighborhood group where this saga began. No sarcasm, no theatrics, just the truth. She trespassed. She stole my water. I went to the HOA. They failed. So I defended my property. The response? Massive. People backed me up. Some shared more Karen stories. One neighbor offered to mow my lawn. Another left a homemade pie at my door with a sticky note. "You're a legend." 2 days later, the special HOA meeting happened behind closed doors, but word spread quickly. Karen showed up with more folders, wild accusations, and imaginary lawsuits, but none of it stood up against the mountain of receipts I gave them. They reviewed everything, the videos, the documents, the bylaw, and when it was over, they issued a formal warning to her. A $650 fine for trespassing and a notice that any further incidents would strip her of HOA privileges. They didn't apologize to me directly, but their silence said it all. Karen was no longer their golden child. She was a liability. And her fan club? Gone. The board member who always backed her up resigned quietly the next week. Now, Karen walks her dog with her head down. She avoids eye contact. Her porch is still dirty. Her hose stays coiled like a museum artifact. But even then, she wasn't finished. She filed one last complaint, this time with the city. Claimed I had illegally connected a sewage system to my property. The inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, serious expression. But after a quick look at the setup and a 5-minute laugh that nearly made him choke, he cleared me on the spot. And that, my friend, was the day I knew for sure Karen had finally run out of moves. The city inspector gave everything a once-over, took a few notes, then looked me dead in the eye and said, "Well, the hose line's temporary, so there's no violation here." Then he smirked and added, off the record, "Honestly, I wish more folks handled their problems with this kind of creativity." I offered him a bottle of water. He grinned and said, "Only if it's not from the hose." By then, the video had passed 5.2 million views online. Interview requests started rolling in. One guy even emailed asking if I'd sell t-shirts with the phrase "Hose Justice" printed on the front. My neighbors treated me like a folk hero. But honestly, I didn't feel heroic. I just felt relieved. After weeks of chaos, the silence felt like medicine. Still, I didn't drop my guard. People like Karen don't vanish. They bide their time. They lurk. They wait. They look for new ways to sink their teeth in. So I left the valve installed, kept the cameras running, even placed a brand new hose out front. Shiny, coiled, gleaming like bait on a hook. Not because I thought she'd come back, but if she did, I wanted to be ready. Because now the whole neighborhood knew one thing for sure. If Karen ever came for my hose again, she'd better bring a mop. It had been almost a month since the great sewage storm hit her castle. Karen's house, once ground zero for noise, passive-aggressive complaints, and unsolicited advice, now stood like a haunted monument to suburban tyranny. Her porch lights stayed off, curtains drawn tight, and not once did her designer flip-flops touch my lawn again. The hose sat untouched, still, resting in the sun like a battle-worn soldier, enjoying early retirement. For the first time in ages, my mornings were quiet. No mystery puddles, no spikes in the water bill, no feeling like a trespasser on my own grass. Life had returned to something that felt like normal. The neighbors didn't just nod anymore. They smiled, they talked, they lingered. Walter, you remember, the hammock guy, invited me over for a backyard barbecue. Someone else left a shiny gold hose nozzle on my porch. No note, just a silent salute. A little suburban trophy. Meanwhile, online, the story had taken on a life of its own. The original video kept blowing up. People made memes. Some stitched their own Karen tales onto mine. One guy created a parody opera using the sprinkler footage in slow motion. Another turned it into a dramatic comic strip with cartoon versions of me and Karen locked in battle. Messages poured in from all over. Folks thanking me for standing up, for proving that you can fight back against neighborhood tyranny. I didn't go looking for fame, but I'll admit, it felt good. Still, I never let the defenses down completely. Karen had gone dark. But dark didn't mean done. It meant she was waiting. One evening, just after sunset, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. No return address, no name. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded once. In tight, angry cursive I knew all too well, it read, "You may have won this time, but this neighborhood won't be yours forever. I'll be back stronger." I laughed, not out of humor, but because it was so Karen. Dramatic, vague, totally useless. The very next day, a moving truck showed up in front of her house. No heads up, no goodbyes, just workers boxing up her patio furniture, those weird ceramic frogs, and that horrible pink flamingo she used to guard her mailbox like a plastic sentinel. She didn't speak to anyone. She just vanished. By the end of the week, her house was on the market. Days later, a young couple with a toddler moved in. They introduced themselves, brought cookies, and politely asked if it was okay to use their own hose hookup. I nearly cried. But the story didn't end there. About a week later, I got an email from a guy named Marcus. He lived in another HOA, clear across town. Turns out, Karen had resurfaced and wasted no time going full Karen again. First it was complaints about someone's wind chimes. Then she went after a neighborhood cat for walking across her front step. And finally, you guessed it, she was caught dragging someone else's hose to wash her car. Marcus had found me through the viral video. He asked if I had any advice on how to handle her. I sent him everything. The valve design, the camera brands I used, and a document I'd titled Karen Defense Protocol, just in case. He replied with 3 words, "This means war." I didn't hear from him for a few days, but when I did, it was glorious. Turns out, Marcus had taken my idea and leveled it up. Instead of sewage, he used a cocktail of compost tea and expired fertilizer. Totally organic, completely legal, and absolutely disgusting. Karen got hit again. Only this time, it happened right in front of a group of neighborhood kids riding scooters. The footage wasn't as crisp as mine, but it didn't need to be. It was hilarious. She screamed, slipped, and face-planted straight into her rose bushes like a slow-motion disaster. That video hit the internet like wildfire. Within 36 hours, people were calling it Karen's Revenge, Part 2. And that's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was a mobile disaster, a traveling circus of entitlement that infected every HOA she touched. But thanks to the internet, every time she reared her head, someone was ready to hose her back into place. After that, I decided that I could make something useful out of this madness. So I started this YouTube channel. It's a small one. Stories about ridiculous dramas in condominiums, absurd feuds between neighbors, and suburban nonsense that's too petty to be made up. By the way, don't forget to subscribe. People are tired of being pushed around in their own driveways. They were tired of self-proclaimed dictators in yoga pants and with notebooks. Somehow, my stupid little war over water became something more, a symbol, a call to unite. I started selling a few t-shirts too, stuff like hose before bros, justice flows, and my personal favorite, stay in your sprinkle lane. But you know what the best part of the whole thing was? It wasn't the views, wasn't the comments, wasn't the sweet revenge. It was something simpler. One afternoon, I was in my backyard, trimming hedges, just enjoying the breeze. And then I heard it. Laughter. Real, deep, honest laughter. The kind that makes your chest ache in the best way. It was the new couple, the ones who moved into Karen's old house. They were chasing their toddler through a sprinkler they'd set up in their own yard, using their own hose. The kid was shrieking with joy. The parents were soaked and laughing. No one was screaming. No one was stealing water. No one was issuing fines over wind chimes or garden gnomes. That was the real win. Not the memes, not the fame. Not even watching Karen eat dirt in her rose bushes. It was peace. It was a neighborhood where people respected fences, time, and each other. Where the only thing coming from a hose was water, not war. If you like this story of my revenge on my impudent neighbor, please like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the bell. Also, right now, in front of you, you see another story about Karen HOA on the screen. Be sure to listen to it. It's even more funny. Thank you for watching.